In my last video, I mentioned a tiny shed located on the oldest Hawaiian island, and my plans to convert it into a micro shop of sorts. Well, this is it. This is what I'm calling the Atomic Pacific Outpost, and in this video I will be doing all that I can towards the goal of having a makerspace on Kauai. So, let's get started. The Atomic Pacific Outpost, or the APO as it were, is actually just a 10x7 garden shed the original owner of the property sourced from Costco. And while this isn't a very romantic origin story for a workshop, I love it all the same. So I started just by first cleaning the thing out and preparing it for the flooring. We did the house in some cheap vinyl planks from Home Depot, and I had 2 boxes left over, just enough to do the shed. Now, before coming out here, I had zero experience laying this type of flooring and no internet connection to learn. So I just went at it with no knowledge and gut feelings. And really, they just kind of snapped together like Legos from one row to the next. I used a chop saw to size the end pieces, and when I got to the last row, I used a track saw to rip the final narrow width. And once finished, I just painted up some 1x4s I found under the house and threw them into the shed to hide the edges of the flooring. Alright, finished product. It's pouring down rain. And get in here. Whew. Man, these makeshift 1x3 baseboards were a total pain in the ass. Working in paradise is awesome because you don't need AC, the temperature is always perfect, but when you're trying to paint something and it rains 3 times a day, it's difficult. I eventually just gave up and slopped the paint on and then just nailed them in here while the paint was still wet. But they turned out fine. And let's be real, this is way nicer than a shed should probably be. The product itself is amazing. We did these in the house as well, and these were just the remnants. And they look crazy realistic. Like really impressive looking. They don't look like cheap vinyl floors at all. And really, the only thing that gives them away is that they're soft under the feet. Otherwise, you'd swear it was wood. But now that this is done, what I need to do is take measurements of the shed and kind of lay it out with the CAD program of where I want, like my general purpose workbench. I'm also going to do like a little computer area so I can work without being distracted by paradise. I'm excited, man. I mean, it's tiny, but I think it's going to be pretty cool. Anyways, on to the next project. Oh, how I underestimated the power of distraction enabled by Kauai. First things first, though, I started with a toolbox. Well, 2 toolboxes, actually. The idea was to build simple cabinets that allowed me to place Milwaukee pack-outs on drawer slides, giving me a toolbox that, while not particularly space efficient, was capable of storing tools in an airtight environment. You know, rust and all that. Anyway, I started with some really bad maple plywood. This is how terrible this plywood is, and this is pretty common. There's more void there than there is ply. Ugh. I started by breaking down that crappy plywood with my track saw, doing all of the rip cuts first. So I packed my GRS 16 in my luggage when I came here, and that's giving me nice square cuts. But I did not pack parallel guides, and I'm making a lot of repetitive rips. And so what I've done is I got on my chop saw and cut 2 of these 13.75 inch boards, and that's giving me the spacing I need between this flush edge here, and I can feel it's nice and flush, and my cutting edge. And so I'll just use this every time I need to make a rip of this size. And I cut 2 just to check that I was square. Put the other one way over here, and it's square as well. So with any luck, this should work. So we'll just have to wait and see how the cut comes out. Wish me luck. With the rip cuts out of the way, I could then do the cross cuts. I used the same story stick method with these, and it didn't take too long before I was stacking finished plywood panels. The next step in the machining process was to cut the dados for the cabinet backs. Now, in Texas, I would do this quickly and accurately with my table saw. Here on the island, however, I had to improvise, and I did so by using the depth stop on my track saw. After a little cleanup with a chisel, things were looking pretty crisp, and I could move on to cutting the pocket holes. For strength, these should be cut onto the outside of the cabinet, but I didn't want to see them and place them on the inside, figuring I'm really only using these for clamping force while the glue sets. I think they'll be fine. Historically, when I've done pocket screws, things have gone horribly wrong unless I clamp the pieces tightly together. My problem is I don't have any clamps here, and I went to Home Depot, they didn't have any clamps long enough, and I don't really want to wait on Amazon. What I do have are these sort of cheesy picture frame clamps, and I'm going to try to use them to get these panels aligned and tight before I screw in the pocket holes. I haven't had much luck with these in the past, but I'm going to give it a shot and we'll see how it goes. Last step was to just plug in the cabinet back that I cut out of 1/2-inch ply. Alright, here's the finished product, cut and assembled. I knew going into this that my biggest problems were going to be accuracy and repetition. And I don't have the tools to do repetitive cuts. And I'm learning, at home I have these fancy expensive tools and I can, build a carcass like this in a matter of minutes. Here it takes hours, and my lack of talent starts to show. So like right here, you can see there's about a 32nd of an overhang. And of course in the opposite corner, there's more of the same. None of this is project ending by any means. This is shop furniture. I'm not too worried about it. And also this is going to be painted. So hopefully I can fix a lot of these variances with sanding and paint and little tricks like that. But for the most part, it's getting there. But there was one more thing I wanted to handle before applying a finish. I got some Bondo, mixed it pretty hot, and used it to fill the exposed plywood edges. I've done this before and find that it works almost as well as like hardwood edge banding and takes a fraction of the time. But once that was done, I sanded everything to 160 grit and then threw on some paint I had left over from the house renovation. From here, I went ahead and put some casters on the bottom of each box. This made things a little bit more mobile so I could get comfortable while installing the drawer slides. And if you've seen any of my past videos, you know that I like to cut scrap spacers and use them to space my slides. I think it works just as easy as some fancy jig, and really, it works fine. But I'm getting ahead of myself a bit. Before this project started, I decided I was going to use torpedo docks from STV Racking to secure the packouts to the drawers. These are cheap, simple, and really effective. Essentially, it's just 2 machined pieces of HDPE that locate the packout and 1 piece of ABS that locks it in place. Installation is super simple. First, you mark the center line of your drawer bottom. Then you align the installation template to that center line and pre-drill the holes on one side before flipping it over and pre-drilling for the other. Once done, you simply screw the rails and the catch down. It's a fantastic system and one that I highly recommend. In any case, all that was left to do was install the slides on the drawer bottoms and then start plugging everything into the system. With the toolboxes done, it was time to move on to building a general workbench, running power to the APO, and none of that happened. I got really distracted by both projects in the house and Kauai itself. What in the hell are they doing? Yes, that's a surfboard hanging out both sides of the car. There was just so much stuff that I wanted to do, but couldn't find the time for. For one, I wanted to build a workbench along this wall, and then these 2 toolboxes would go against this wall, and then I'm going to have surfboard racks up top, and then on this wall, right now I just have a Husky shelving unit that was in the house when we bought it. And I think these are great, but I think in a space as small as this, you kind of have to build your own shelving unit to get every square inch of capacity out of it, if that makes sense. I'm a little bummed I didn't get more done this summer. I had far more to do in the house than I thought I was going to have to do. And then you add to that the distraction of the ocean and everything else, and really all I got done were the floors and the toolboxes, which is a bit of a bummer, but I'll be all right. The last thing I need to do before I leave is I got some of these Wise dry desiccant packets. They're 112 grams each, and I got one for each pack out. So right before I leave, I'll drop those packets in these pack outs, lock them up, shut her down, and I won't be back for 2 or 3 months, and we'll see how they did. But until then, I'll leave you with kind of a parting shot of what I'm calling Atomic Pacific Outpost. There she is, my last view. Like I said, I probably won't be back for a couple of months. I'm gonna miss this place. And next time you hear from me, I'll be in Texas. I've got a project idea, so stay tuned and we'll catch you later.